Okay, so this video is going to concern your day-to-day financial process with an SME professional. The first thing I'm going to be covering is how you would import your transactions for a particular day into SME professional. The first thing you're going to need to do in order to do this is to log into your online banking and export the transactions for a set period in either a QIF or OFX file format. The reason we ask for these particular file types is that they are the most robust. Essentially, they are the same in every bank, and the system is very well equipped to handle those imports. If those options, QIF or OFX, are not available to you, please do get in touch with support and we can create an importer to suit your needs. In order to import the bank transactions, after you've exported them from your online banking, you're going to want to log into SME and navigate to Bank and then Add Client Account. This works in a very set way. You're always working from the previous banking day and not for the current day. The reason for this is mainly that standing order payments can be cancelled within 24 hours of them being made, and ultimately what we're aiming to, we would not want you to upload any bank files for an incomplete day of banking. So you're always working one day in arrears. Furthermore, if any upload days are missed, so for example, if you upload for the 17th and the 18th and then the 20th and the 21st, but you miss the 19th, you cannot then go back and upload the transactions from the 19th. This is just a safety mechanism in place to prevent duplicate uploads to the system. However, if this does occur and you do miss a day of banking and you need to import the transactions, please do just get in touch with support and we'll be more than happy to import them for you. So all I'm doing now is I'm going to go to Browse, and I'm going to go to my downloads, and I'm just going to see if I can find my bank import file. Perfect, I've got that just here. So I'm going to upload the file now. You see, once I click upload file from this page, I can see at the bottom a summary of all of the bank lines which have been successfully imported into SME Professional. Now the next thing that I need to do is assign those to different categories. To find where all these bank lines have gone initially, we need to go to Financials and then Unassigned Lines. And this essentially takes us to a page where we can view all of the transactions we've just now uploaded. So we can see them all here. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this particular piece of code in the reference at the very end. So we've got the reference here, and we can see in this one we've got P11T20. We can also see in this one we've got P8T24 and P1T23. Now these are system generated automatic references. When a bank transaction is imported into the system that contains one of the system generated references, the system is already set up to automatically assign this payment to the correct category. So these tend to be generated mainly when creating a standing order mandate. So when the tenant pays them their rent using this reference, the system already knows where to assign this. So for these three payments here, what I'm going to do is go to Bank and then click to Auto Assign Bank Lines. When I click that, we'll find that those three payments disappear from this page and are assigned to the correct categories. So you can see here that those three payments have gone, and we've just got the remaining ones here. Now, for legacy tenancies or tenancies where they're not using that reference, it's also possible to teach the system to recognise unique references attributing to specific properties. So in much the same way that the system generated automatic reference can ferry transactions off to different categories, you can teach the system to recognise references in order to achieve much the same goal. So we'll take this bottom payment here for an example. We've got £725. We can see that it's for Bryson Road and it's a rent payment. What I'm going to do is just highlight this entire reference and copy it. Then from the left hand side, I've got this option to add an automatic reference, the fourth option down. When I click this, it creates a little pop-up. And what I can do is I can paste the reference that I've just copied into this top box here, unique portion of text seen in the bank reference in the download statement. You can then change the category to the property. In this case, I know it's Bryson Road. This will automatically pull through with the rent in subcategory and the amount of management fee that is charged against that property. So when the property is initially set up, that's when the management fee is set against it. You can also select which tenant has paid this money. This can be particularly useful in cases where there's an HMO and you may wish to monitor exactly which payment has been received by which tenant. In this case, from the reference, I know that it's Nicholson, so I can just select Nicholson here. And you see this pulls through to the description with the tenant's name and also their move-in date. I'm just going to hit submit. What I've essentially done there is create an automatic reference so that every single time I receive a payment of this amount, and with this reference it's going to automatically assign it to a property as a rent-in payment. So I'll just show you what that looks like. If I go back to bank and then go to auto assign Banklines, we'll see this payment disappears. Exactly. Now we can only do this for portions of the reference that are going to repeat month on month. So for example, this bottom one here, if the shore rent had April afterwards indicating an April payment, we wouldn't copy the part of the reference that says April, we would copy everything else because April isn't going to repeat again next month. So what I'm going to do is just highlight all of this reference again, copy it, go to the side, click add automatic reference, paste it into here. I know that it's for the shore, so I can type that in as the category. Pulls through with the rent-in payment. I don't know which tenants paid it, so I'm just going to leave it blank. That of course is completely optional. Hit submit. And then finally, for immediate Marygrove rent, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Copy and paste the reference into the automatic reference box. Select the property as the category, pulls through with the rent in, and I can just hit submit. And now to take care of these payments, what I'm going to do is go to bank and then go to auto assign Banklines. And then we're just left with these 3 remaining payments. So for these 3 remaining payments, these all consist of amounts that we're not going to see repeating. They consist of combined rent and deposit and also advance payments of rent. So we can see the bottom one here for Arnott Hill is a rent and deposit. So SME Professional allows you to split down transactions comprising of more than one payment into the individual payments. So what we can do is we're going to split that down into the amount for rent and the amount for deposit. And to do that, what we're going to do is click on the ID number. So when transactions are uploaded to SME Professional, each one is given a unique Bankline ID number. This just helps you locate it on the system, and it also allows you to split the payment down into smaller amounts. So I'm going to click that here. You can see that it takes me to a new page where we can see the original Bankline at the top with the reference and the amount, and you can split it down into as many different amounts as you want. For example, in this case, I know that the deposit is 1,200, so I'm going to split that into that. Then I'm going to do 1,000 here. For the category, I'm going to do Arnott Hill. Now it automatically pulls through as rent in. I know that one of these is deposit, so I'm going to edit the subcategory to deposit in. And I also know that the tenant is Paul Zacher. And then what I'm going to do is just scroll down and go add lines above to take care of this. So I've split that payment and assigned it to different categories. Perfect. Now I'm just going to navigate back to financials and unassigned lines. We've got 2 remaining, and the first one at the bottom here is for £1,600 and it is 2 months advance rent. Now to deal with advance payments of rent, it's a slightly different process. We can split the payments down into smaller amounts, but what we're also wanting to do is attribute them to different dates. So the process is very slightly different, and in this case what you would do is click on the pencil icon. This lets you manually assign the bank line. What I'm going to do is change the category to the property. I know that it's Pilrig Heights, and then instead of it being a rent-in, I'm going to select the category offset rent. Now the difference between that and the splitting of the bank line is that it creates a situation where you're actually able to attribute it to different dates. So offset rent, Pilrig Heights, I'm just going to go submit, and what that's going to do is redirect me to a page where I can split that payment down into different amounts. So we're going to go £800 for 1 month and £800 for the second month. And if I scroll over, I can see at the end I've got calendar. So the first payment's being attributed to the 11th of March. I'm going to push this one forward to the 11th of April. And then I'm just going to add the lines above. Go back to unassigned lines again. And I'm just going to do exactly the same thing with this 6-month advance payment. So click the pencil icon. I can see it's for Crew Street. And then I'm going to assign it to offset rent. The benefit of this as well is that it's very easy to unwind, and we have a whole array of instructions on how to do so. So in this case, we've filled it out with offset rent. I'm just going to hit submit. Redirects me to a new page where I can split it down into the 6 payments of £1,000. And it all comes through with the category of the property and the subcategory rent in. I'm going to scroll over to the side and I'm just going to push it forward to the next 6 months. So we're going to go April 11th, May 11th, June 11th, July 11th, and August 11th. And then we're just going to scroll to the bottom and click Add Lines Above to complete that. Perfect, and now if we go back to Financials and Unassigned Lines, we'll see that we've got no more bank lines left to assign. And we can continue on with the next part of the payment process. The next section that I want to cover is how we would monitor and chase rent arrears, and how we would pay out the landlords for particular properties using the bulk payment method. So the first thing I want to direct your attention to is the property balances page. To access this page, we go to properties and then we go to property balances. This page essentially acts as a dashboard from which you can see a lot of relevant financial information pertaining to certain properties. So there's several columns. We can see that we've got the ID for each property and also the address of each property here. The landlord balance column populates with the amounts of money that are available to be paid out to each landlord as it currently stands. Clicking on the header can order this from lowest to highest and highest to lowest. So to decide which landlords to pay, you can double click to order all properties with an available landlord balance together at the top. So you can see at a glance where there's money available to be paid out to a landlord. The current month payment date essentially denotes when the landlord is expecting to be paid for this current period. So when this is green, it indicates that the payment date for this month has been reached, and when it's red, it indicates that the payment date hasn't been reached yet, and you may wish to refrain from paying the landlord just yet in case there's more rent to be received or in case they aren't expecting the payment yet. For included and run, essentially you can toggle between excluding something from the landlord payment run and including it. So typically what we would expect normally is for anything where there's a positive landlord balance and where the current month payment date has been reached to be included, and for it to be excluded where the current month payment date has not been reached. So it would typically look something like this. Now, the tenant arrears column is used in much the same way. You can order this from lowest to highest, and it's essentially used to monitor and chase tenant arrears. So if everything is as to be expected and every rent payment is up to date, we would expect this to be filled with 0. There are 0 arrears for the property. Where this is a positive amount, it indicates that the tenant is in arrears. And in that case, for example with Elb Street, you can see £780. Means there's £780 in arrears. You can see then that it shows you the latest due date, so the last due date passed, and the next due date. This just works to give you a little bit more context about how far the last due date has been missed by, so whether or not you'd be expecting the rent payment to perhaps clear in your bank in a few days, or if they've paid very late. So you can see, for example, this one was the 1st, so if it was now at the 20th, it would indicate that those arrears need to be chased. So you can also see we've got a warning column. These just work to provide a little bit more context again about the nature of the arrears present. So we can see these say category 5. If I hover over the question mark, it shows me in greater detail what those warnings mean. So category 5, tenant arrears are more than 7 days old. Expected days in arrears, this column can be filled out for each property if there are any arrears for each property that are actually expected. So in the case of housing benefit payments, those can have a 4-week delay from being receipted. And what we would expect there is that you can fill out 28 days expected arrears, and then you can see the tenant arrears column here, excluding expected, denotes any arrears that go beyond the expected days that the tenant's meant to be in arrears for. Furthermore, you can also post any other relevant financial notes against the property using this function here. So for example, you can see send text to John, John will pay on Friday, landlord will send check for boiler. So it brings you the dates, and it also brings you any kind of pertinent financial information that users have entered against the property. So Essentially, to monitor the tenant arrears, what you can do is you can access the tenant ledger from this page as well. So if you click on the number present, and this counts for the zeros as well, in the tenant arrears column, it takes you to the tenant ledger where you're able to more accurately monitor the tenant arrears. So if I click on 780, it opens this page in a new tab, and I can see all of the financial information against a particular tenant for a property here. On the left-hand side, I've got several options in order to chase the arrears. Through SME Professional, if you're set up to receive and send bulk, if you're set up for bulk SMS, you can click to SMS tenants. This will bring up a pop-up that will be filled with the tenant's phone number, the tenant's name, and a pre-filled message that explains essentially the situation and also the amount of arrears they are currently in. Similarly, you can also email the tenants, and again, pre-filled message comes up that you can edit as needed. And you can also use these options to email the landlord or text the landlords, letting them know that you're aware of the situation. So if you've chased the arrears of the property and confirmed that they're legitimate, you can navigate back to properties and property balances. And you can proceed with your landlord payment run. So what we're wanting to do here is we're going to order all of these at the top, and we're going to look at the ones which have a positive balance. For the sake of this demonstration and showing you the kind of most comprehensive overview of paying landlords, I'm just going to include everything where there's a positive balance for the payment run. Furthermore, you'll notice that Main Street says 1,242 View Portfolio Ledger. Where a landlord owns more than one property, it is optional that you can group these together in a portfolio. It essentially means that the landlord receives one statement showing all of the financial movement against each property and one payment for that combined amount. It also means that expenses for one property that are in excess of the amount of rent received for it can be covered using the income from the other properties. So there is an advantage to setting it up like that, but you'll have one main portfolio, one main property on the portfolio from which you can view all the financial information, and the others will just refer you back to that property there. So the first stage in paying out your landlords is to click on balance comparison. Essentially, to pay landlords through the bulk payment process, you're wanting to make sure they're included, and then you're essentially just wanting to click down this list in the order that it's presented to you in. So the first one is to click balance comparison. Now, ideally, this page should be blank. If anything appears in here, if any properties appear in here, you will need to examine and find out where the discrepancy is coming from. It normally means that a landlord has been paid an amount different to what was instructed on the system. But it is rare that we would expect to see with the bulk payment method this showing anything unless there had been an overpayment. And that you can always get in contact with support if anything does appear here and you'd like some help in ascertaining exactly what's going on. So I'm back at property balances, and you can see now that I've clicked that and everything's been fine. It's gone green and there's a tick next to it. So it essentially means that as you click down these options, they'll turn green and have ticks next to them. It lets you start your payment process, go away, do something else, come back and pick up right from where you left off. It keeps you aware of exactly where you are during that process. The next step is to include all expenses. So where you've posted invoices against each property, where there's an available balance to cover it, clicking include all expenses will draw down the landlord balance by the invoices. So say for the shore, if that had a £300 invoice posted against it, a £300 expense, clicking this button would reduce this by £300 and set the money aside to pay to the contractor. So I'll just do that now. It comes up with a warning just to make sure that you are going to do that. Shows you at the top 3 expenses deducted from properties. It also gives you notice if there's any deductions which are more than 30 days old that may require your attention. So it also brings up properties where there's excess expenses. So where the sum of the expenses is greater than the amount of balance available in the property to cover them, you can review and amend these things here. So we can see that the first one is the shore. There's about £1,800 available, but there's over £3,000 worth of undeducted expense. So to decide what we're going to do with that, we're going to have to click this number here to see what the expenses are. So there's 2 here. One for £200 and one for £3,157. So ultimately what I know is that we've got enough money available to pay the contractor for the £200 clean. So I'm going to go to Include in Ledger and Statement and click the tick here just to include that. For the next one, I don't have enough money to pay the contractor just yet on this property. What I can do is part pay it. So to part pay it, it's going to be much the same thing. You click to include in the ledger and statement, but instead of that manually drawing down the balance, you essentially get a pop-up where you can decide what to do with this. So you can either cancel and close dialogue, which essentially just leaves it as it is. This can be useful if you know that you're going to receive money from the landlord to cover the expense shortly and you just want to hold off from paying them for another day. You can record the balance to carry forward. That's where you draw down all of the landlord's available income for the period to pay off as much of the invoice as possible, and then you carry the rest forward for another time. The landlord will receive a zero balance statement explaining that their income has gone towards paying off this expense. Or you could avoid this entirely and invoice the landlord directly, so deal with it out with the rental income for the property. This last option, ignore warning and tick for inclusion, is typically something we would advise against to avoid drawing the landlord's ledger into a negative balance, and is generally only used during troubleshooting. So record balance to carry forward, we're going to part pay as much as we can, so submit excess expense. You'll see as this refreshes, we've suddenly got a new expense posted. So we've seen this amount here. We've got essentially 1,600 paid of this expense, and it shows you the description that will appear in the landlord's statement, how much of the initial invoice has been paid with the landlord's available income, and that the balance has been carried forward, and we see the remainder posted underneath, ready for next time. So now that we've taken care of that, what we're essentially going to do is go back to properties and property balances. So we've clicked to include all expenses. The next thing we're going to do is deduct all withholding tax. So what I'm going to do is, for where landlords live abroad for more than 50% of the year and they're not NRL exempt, they can be set up to display this on the system so that when deduct all withholding tax is selected, the withholding tax is deducted from their available income against their properties. And this will only do it for where the landlords have been set up for withholding tax to be deducted. So I'll just click here. That takes you to a pop-up page where you can see the address and also how much withholding tax has been deducted. So from here, I'm ready to generate the preview statements. This again acts as just like a final check, so you can ensure that the landlord statements appear correct. So for example, this is what the statements will typically look like. We'll have your company and address at the top here, the landlord and their address here, and then the landlord's property. The statement period consists of the date at which the last statement was, the date after the last statement was generated through to today's date, and the rent received will have in brackets next to it the period that the rent applies to. So we can see that this applies to the 1st of April through to the 30th of April. You can see the amount here, and that the expenditure consists of the management fee and the total, which is going to be going to the landlord. If there's any outstanding expenses and fees, we can see these here as well. So we can see that there's total outstanding, so perhaps the landlord's going to send in money to cover those. And you can check every statement like this too. So I'll close this now. I've decided that everything's absolutely fine with that, so I'm going to go Properties, Property Balances, and at this point I'm ready to generate the posted and emailed landlord statements, the final statements. So I'll generate the posted landlord statements first. This is determined whether it's a posted or a emailed statement. When setting up the landlord, you can set the preference for either posted or emailed. Clicking the link for the posted ones opens a PDF that you can download or print off in order to send it to the landlords. If I navigate back to property balances, I can do generate emailed landlord statements. This creates the emailed landlord statements, and you can see them here. You have a summary of the address, the landlord, the amount paid out, and the link to the statement. These haven't been sent yet. That's something that we'll do at the end, but it does show you they've been successfully generated. So I'll close these now and come back. At this point, I'm ready to generate backs payments. So that's where all of these landlord balances are going to get drawn down to zero, and we're going to instruct payments on the back schedule. Perfect. So you can see 7 entries have been added to the back schedule. 1 £0 line has been added to the system for properties which did not require paying out. So that references the case where we drew down the available balance for the property to pay out part of an invoice, and the landlord's going to receive a statement explaining that that's occurred. So we can see here we now got 0 landlord balances. All of the payments have been instructed. The next thing we want to do is scroll down and view the back schedule. We can double check all the details are correct here, and ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to go to the left hand side and create the back schedule. Clicking here downloads the file to your computer that you can then upload to your bank account to instruct payments, and then after this has been completed and the payments have been made, the most important thing is to mark all of these as complete so that they are completed and removed from the back schedule. If you notice that you've added a property in error and you want to reverse it, so essentially stop the payment being made and retain the money for a later date, you can click delete and that undoes everything. But complete will essentially finish it off and move it to a separate section as though the payment has been made. I'll close that now. Last thing we want to do after these back payments have been made is go to email statements. So from the left hand side, just click email statements, and that takes us to a page where we can see all of the emails and the statements to each landlord, and we can click to send all unsent emails. So at this point we've successfully paid our landlords for the period, we've monitored all tenant arrears. What I want to do now is show you how to pay contractors using the bulk payment method and adding them to the back schedule as well. So what we do in this case, we go to contractor and contractor summary. This will be populated with any expenses where we've drawn down the available income for the landlord in this case. So for example, we've got the velvet cleaning one for £200 here. Ultimately what we want to do here is we can see the company that it's due to, any kind of contact details for the contractor, the total amount due to them, also if there's any commission, and we can click the down arrow to see a breakdown of those. So you could have multiple works here, like 3 contributing to this total, and you'll be able to see the individual items here as well. At this point we can click in the PDF column to generate the remittance. This shows us with your company and the company's address at the top here, today's date, remittance advice to the contract company, and also it would show their address underneath as well, and it shows a breakdown of all of the works and what they've received for it. This also creates a pop-up email where you can send the remittance directly from SME Professional. You can see the link here as well. Once you've done that, you can click in this column here, Pay, to add the payment to the back schedule. So I'm just going to do that for each of these, adding them to the back schedule. Normally I would generate the remittance advice for each one, but essentially what I want to do is show you that these can be added to the same back schedule that the landlords are on as well. So if I go to view back schedule, although we have essentially paid the landlords already due to the earlier part of the demonstration, it is possible to pay both the landlords and the contractors from the same back schedule. You would just create the back schedule and upload it to your bank containing all, and then remember to mark all as complete. If you want to remove an item from the back schedule for a contractor, say if you've already instructed the payment, you can just click on the tick to complete that as well, in much the same way. So the other thing that I want to show you is how to post invoices. So if we go to Financials and Landlord Deductions, this is the page by which you can post anything that is to be deducted from the landlord's available income. So you can see the first option you've got on the left hand side is a landlord expense. This is where you'd import your invoices from a contractor. So clicking here creates a pop-up. You can select the property. You can select a description visible to the landlord in their statement pertaining to this deduction. So if I put new boiler, you can do the amount due, we'll do £2,000. You can calculate the VAT payable and amount. The system will do this automatically for you. You can select which contractor this is due to. You'll notice that contract heating has 12% in brackets next to it. Some of the contractors don't have anything in brackets next to them. Where there's a percentage in the brackets next to them, it denotes the amount of commission that you are set up to always receive from this contractor. So when I click this, you can see that it automatically populates the commission received by underpaying contractor box for £240. However, this is completely editable and I can easily remove this as well. You can input also the invoice number as the contractor reference, and you can also upload a copy of the invoice to have on the system at all times. I will just submit that now, and that's essentially me submitted this this invoice. If I go financials, landlord deductions, just to refresh that page, I want to find that invoice at a glance. So what I can actually do is search in the search bar for the amount, and I can see it all there. As we're paying these out by the via the bulk payment method, so including all expenses when we're paying out landlords, there's nothing further we need to do here. But of course, if you post an invoice in error, you can always go to the delete column and click the red X to get rid of it. The other options we've got available to us other than landlord expense, so payment due to a contractor, are general fees, which is payments due to your business. So this could be just essentially this could be even for a one-off management fee for a let-only property. You've also got general fee with business expense, marketing fee. So if you wanted to separate out exactly how much you're taking as marketing. We've also got withholding tax, which is typically used by those who are not on the bulk payment method and who aren't set up to deduct withholding tax automatically from properties. If you wanted to credit a float for the property, so if you were setting aside funds to pay for a large expense from the landlord's available income, you could do float payments in from this section. You could also credit your business float, perhaps if you paid for an invoice on behalf of the contractor, business float rent and business float loan. And an overpayment is something that is used during troubleshooting where a landlord has been overpaid either rent or something else, and it is very, very rarely used and normally only in a troubleshooting circumstance. If you wanted to see historically all of your completed items, so every invoice that's ever been created on the system or any deduction that's been made, you can click completed items here. And if you wanted to set up regular payments, so payments which were scheduled to come off either once a month, once a year, once every 2 months, etc., you can click here. And this takes you to a page where you can set up, from the left hand side, add payment, add a regular payment. Looks slightly different. You still select the property, you still give it a description, select the contractor, but you can tick how often you want the payment period to occur. And you've got many options here as well. So for example, you could set this up instead of a landlord expense, you could do a general fee and you could do a flat rate management fee. So you've got an agreement with the landlord, you're not taking a percentage of the rent, you're taking a flat rate each time. You can post that here to repeat every single month, essentially. So that would be how you post invoices on the system. The next thing I want to show you concerns how you would calculate your profits using SME Professional. So the first thing I want to do is show you how to access profits. So if we go to financials and view profits, this takes us to a page where we can see all of the profits, all the fees taken with an SME Professional between a set period. So we can see this is 23rd of March to 22nd of April. And it shows a rough breakdown of the fees that have been collected. So it shows you the rough breakdown of the rent-in fee and the total here, any commission, any tenant agency fees, landlord and direct payments of fees, etc. If we scroll down, you see under tenant fee refund, so debit categories which denote refunds, you've got the total amount taken as fees here, including VAT. So £233 in this case. It is test data, so it shows this amount. Underneath, you've also got the breakdown of the VAT on that, and then the amount underneath minus VAT. So you'd be transferring over to your bank as taking fees £233.40. If you wanted to see a more detailed breakdown of each of these, what you would do is go to admin and exports, and this would show you a transaction by transaction breakdown of your revenue for a set period, and you would scroll down and locate export revenue letting agents only. You would set this to the same range as was showing in your profits from the 23rd of March to the 22nd of April, and you click go. That downloads a spreadsheet which essentially contains all of the transactions pertaining to your profits for that time range, and it will also show any kind of fee transfers out as well, or any refunds too. So the reconciliation page from Bank Reconciliation functions in much the same way as the profit page. It gives a rough breakdown of exactly what is sitting in what category. So we can see what's sitting in deposit, for example, how much is in deposit in, how much is in deposit, how much has been paid out up until this date. So you can change the end date and work from whenever you need to reconcile to ultimately. And what you would do is check all of these balances, and then at the very bottom you can see a total, 77,675. This would be what should be in your bank account at the time you're trying to reconcile to. If this all appears correct, what you can do is see an individual breakdown of the transactions comprising this amount, so you can go to View Running Balance on the left hand side. From View Running Balance, you want to click Change Filter Options. This creates a little pop-up, and what you can do is select, instead of all accounts, client account, because that's what's feeding through to your reconciliation, everything that's been uploaded from your client account into SME Professional. You would do the start period as the time you last reconciled, and the end period is the time you're trying to reconcile up to. So we could say, for the sake, 23rd of March to the 22nd of April. Of course, we do advocate that you reconcile as often as you can. Tick box to set opening balance as the system running total before the start date. So just to have it continue on from what the original opening balance was on your system when you started, you click here. And then you'd also want to tick Do Not Display Balancing Payments. Balancing payments show the movement of funds around the system and essentially are not entirely relevant to what you want to see here. So you want to click Filter. What I'm going to do is actually change the filter options just to put it back as far as possible, just to show you, because obviously it's test data, so it doesn't appear as like a normal system would. So we can see essentially all of the bank transactions we've just had and where they're sitting in the system for this period. And if we're happy with all the categories and we think that's all, if that all appears to be absolutely correct, you can see we've got a closing balance Monday 31st of December 2018 set to 0. You can see that we've got the running balance here, taking us up to 15,000. So between these two dates we've got 15,000, and then what we can do is mark all as reconciled. That essentially locks all of the transactions in place, meaning that they cannot be easily moved around in the system or edited from this point onwards. Ultimately, the last thing I want to show you is how to handle deposits through SME Professional. So what you would do is go to Properties, Other Balances and Deposit Balances to see a summary of all of your properties, the deposit requirement and the deposit balance currently held against each. So we can see at the top we've got Arnett Hill, shows you the status of the property, whether or not it's occupied, the deposit balance, so the amount of money that is physically held as deposit within your account, the days since move-in, and as this is test data, it will not appear as you would normally expect to within your own system, and the amount of deposit that's required for the property per tenant. What we're going to do is use the 4 properties we've got here at the top that have a positive deposit balance to create deposit profiles for a deposit scheme in bulk. So what we can do for these 4 properties is tick Bulk Export, and then from the left hand side you can click your chosen deposit scheme to create a file containing all of the information for the deposit profiles for that scheme. You can then, depending on your deposit scheme, either email that to the account manager to set up the deposit profiles, or you can log into your go to your login area for your chosen scheme and upload it there to create the deposit profiles, which just saves you the time of having to manually input that information. After you've created the deposit profiles for each of these properties, you can also ensure that these are clicked on Bulk Export and then go Pay Deposits here. This creates essentially a page, a pop-up where you can fill out the scheme bank account number, the scheme sort code and the recipient name. It shows you the property list, the amount, so this feeds through from the required amount of deposit and not the actual balance physically held. And then you've got balance reference, which shows the amount of deposit physically held in the system. So for Arnett Hill, this is quite important. This could be a property with 2 tenancies. The balance reference denotes that 2,400 has been received, perhaps the deposit for both tenants, but you're only wanting to pay out the amount for one tenant for 1,200. You can put the date, a bank reference and a description there as well. You want to ensure that adding the payments to back schedule is clicked and you can hit submit. And that is essentially how you would add these payments to the back schedule so that you can pay the deposits to the scheme.